Serious, when did you realize you were being manipulated by someone you trusted? I noticed that every time I brought up something that bothered me in the relationship, I somehow ended up apologizing for something. When I started realizing that I was feeling like I was constantly walking on eggshells, I never knew which version of my friend did get when we saw each other or when we hung out. I also just completely stopped disagreeing with them because I didn't want to hear them tell me how wrong I was if we didn't share the same viewpoint. My best friend suddenly distanced herself from me, but every now and then she'd call and ask if I wanted to do something, and I was encouraged because I thought it meant that things were still good between us. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that she only called when she wanted to do something that required a ride, since she didn't have a car. The only thing I can say in my defense is that I don't use people that way, so I didn't recognize user behavior. You can bet I do now. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all the awards. Quarantine had woke me up to that. As soon as I stopped texting first, they will never text me back, unless of course they need a homework answer sent. I said goodbye and let a lot of friendships drift into the wind by not being the person to always initiate contact. And it helped show me who was valuing me for who I am. I was living with my former best friend and his GF at the time. When I asked for grocery receipts, I trusted him and his ex to buy groceries. BC, I didn't have a car at the time, plus our work schedules were different, so I couldn't go with them, and they wouldn't provide any. The only reason I became suspicious was BC, they started asking for a ridiculous amount of money for my half and the actual amount of food wasn't adding up. Up until that point they never asked for a crazy amount, and I was content with our groceries. But I noticed they became extremely greedy. When I then asked to see a banking statement, they wouldn't even provide me with that either. At that point I just realized they were finessing me out of extra money and I started buying my own food. I just bit my tongue. BC, we only had like 2 months left on the lease. They tried to gaslight me and make me seem like the bad guy any chance they had, almost the entire time I lived with them actually. Eventually I grew apart from him once I moved away, and the only reason he hit me back up was BC, she cheated on him, so he probably didn't have anyone else to turn to. Go figure. We don't talk anymore. Duck him. 8 years into the relationship. As we're sitting down he explains to me that the first couple years we were together he only saw me as a place to crash and free rides. But he loved me now, and even though I accomplished all the goals he set for me so we could get married, he said, I never really thought you could do it. Oh, and also you got fat. But don't worry, we can fix it. It was like a magic veil lifted and I finally saw who he really was. Fuck you, James. Edit. But also, thank you. My mother and I have always had a rocky relationship. She's always encouraged me to tell her what's wrong. However, anytime I would, she'd immediately go, sorry, I'm such a terrible mother. I give you everything you want, and it's still not good enough. Why don't you just go live with someone you don't hate? Keep in mind this happens over small things such as mom. I'd appreciate it if you'd knock before coming into my room. You know how easily I startle, and you barging into my room really upsets me. Update. I'd like to thank my psychopathic mother for all the upvotes, the awards, and for helping me find other people that relates to this bullpoop dramatic wave and bow. When your parents get a divorce, it's rare for both parents to take the high road and not twist the narrative to get the kid or kids on their side. Having one or more parent talk poop about the other through their kids is pure manipulation. Having one or more parent talk poop about the other through their kids is pure manipulation. Is it ever? My god. My ex-friend in early high school had divorced parents, and they had a nasty divorce and would legit do exactly that to both kids. I witnessed it way too many times, and it was so uncomfortable to be around cause I got they hated each other and didn't get along and all, but it was super toxic to their kids. Like for example, my friend played into the manipulation, so she didn't make it any better for anyone either. She was very spoiled with expensive items and one day wanted something fancy and brand new. So she asked her dad. He said no, she has to earn work for it. So she gets mad at that and goes to her mom and tells her what he said, so then her mom goes and buys said item to spite the dad. It was just an endless cycle. My parents were a rare couple who divorced and neither of them badmouthed the other until I was well into adulthood. So she gets mad at that and goes to her mom and tells her what he said, so then her mom goes and buys said item to spite the dad. The only time this ever happened to me was when my dad thought I was being disrespectful. So he sold my car and told me to figure it out, and my mom was so pissed off that she bought me a car. She always managed to make me do things I didn't really want to do, but the last straw was when she decided I had to stop being friends with two mates of mine over something stupid that offended her. Cut her off over that, and she then proceeded to act derisively. "You'll come back." Then badmouthed me and then begged me to take her back. 10 years later I'm still friends with those two guys, and she's still out of my life. When literally every time me and my mom talked she played the victim. I was trying to help her raise me, ask me about my grades and stuff. For her I just existed. She wasn't responsible at all. I grew up watching her play the victim to others, and I was always on her side. 'Cause she's my mom, you know. Also I never really understood what was going on. I started getting older and older, and seeing poop after poop shit. I understood what she did to my father, to my stepdad, to my sister, to her friends. Probably I'd be the next one who she would use and throw away. I talked to her, and you know the result. The victim. Nothing, it's her fault. The last time we talked, I was expecting the victim card. When she started speaking, I already knew what was going to happen. I didn't even say a word. I just agreed with her, and the next day I moved out. I'm not wasting my time. It was the last day before quarantine. I remember it as if it was yesterday. Friday night, Saturday morning I was packing my stuff. They played victim every argument, caught them in lies all the time, talked behind my back, tried to make me feel the same way they did about everything, stole from me, ghosted me every so often, and hearing the same thing about them from other people. My parents used to force me to excel in everything, so that I would give them a life where they wouldn't have to work for anything, expecting me to provide them everything. It's sad that some parents see their kids as their retirement plan. No one asked to be born. People don't owe their parents shit. Edit. Notice how I said some. I'm fortunate enough to have the best parents who love us unconditionally. I would give my life for them. However, I'm well aware that not everyone has that. If your parents are toxic, you have every right to cut them out. If you're the toxic one, sort your poop out. Parents see their kids as their retirement plan. My parents in a nutshell. My dad. People have kids, so they are take care of in old age. My mom. Kids are meant to do the housework, so the parents can relax after their day. Took me until after the engagement to realize that my cheating ex-fiancé was trying to browbeat me into submission. In a hoe. I quickly recognized emotional blackmail and manipulation from my mill after getting married to a different girl years later due to that experience. I called her out on it. She doesn't like that. But since my wife and sister-in-law and brother-in-law also recognize it, they've got my back. When I was about 12 I noticed that my younger sister had the hardest time walking in a straight line. We'd be walking along the sidewalk and she'd constantly veer into me. I finally got frustrated once and told her to pay more attention. That she probably didn't realize it, but she was crowding into me all the time. She said I wondered when you'd notice. Apostrophe. She'd been doing it on purpose. Come to find out, she was doing lots of little things on purpose. Like asking me to get her a drink when I was heading into the kitchen for something else. Just to see if I'd do it. I know it sounds inconsequential, but this realization had a huge impact on me. I'd enjoy doing nice things for people I love. Because why wouldn't I? But suddenly I realized they might not be extending the same thought and care to me. It had never occurred to me to ask people for things just to see if they'd get them, or herd them around just to see what they would do. It had never occurred to me to play mind games with people, or that people could be playing mind games with me. I never said anything to her about it after that, but it broke something important in our relationship, and it added some difficulty for me in trusting other people and their motives. Still bugs me thinking about it now, and it's been over 20 years. I understand you. It's awful. My sister is like this too, and for the longest time she derived pleasure from it, and even more so, a gleeful sort of malice. Once I realized it and pointed it out to her, I still remember the mean gleam in her eye, the derisive snicker as I accused her. She didn't deny it. She said I was so easy to control. It left me shaken. What was wrong with me that I had allowed that control over me? How had I not realized sooner? It left me doubting my mental faculties and judgment. I still remember that day with so much shame. I started the conversation with her quietly angry, and as she laughed and sneered at me I left it feeling cowed and vulnerable. I hate being hypervigilant all the time now. I hate questioning people's motives and requests. I feel like a watchful, suspicious person, closely off and wary. I limit my interactions with her and try to relax my outlook with everyone else. I try to be cautious and not suspicious. Careful, not gullible. It's a process. Ita, the telling interaction happened in our 20s, when I just could no longer go on ignoring her actions. We are both in our 40s now and she is, sadly enough, married to someone who beat her at her own game. If it were a comedy, I could gloat and smile at justice being served. But it's real life and quite sad to see it play out. When my sister became ill, and our mother kept pushing me to call your sister, she's sick, and because I'm generally a nice person I did. And when I began to wonder, the time I was admitted to the hospital for a bad MRSA infection, or when I was dealing with all kinds of medical trauma prior to the MRSA, I never got a call from my sister. Did our mother ever say the same to her? When I was 27 I started taking my anxiety and depression seriously and began seeing a therapist. It wasn't until then that I realized, looking back all these years, that so many people had been manipulating me and or taking advantage of me, and I just had neither the self-esteem nor the mental clarity to see it. Ditto. I had an atrocious childhood, and any time I opened up to anyone, they would downplay everything. They weren't there, they didn't know, but they were sure it wasn't that bad, or I'm sure your parents did their best, etc. It wasn't until I went to therapy did I slowly realize that yes, it was really bad. When every single small conversation became a mental war, trying to combat and fight off every lie and figure out what's the truth, what's a lie, and what is not even being said. I get that. I had a friend who would lose his poop over the smallest things. For example, me literally only sending him a snap at 2 AM. Like relax, we both know you always stay up till 4 AM and literally no one is forcing you to open the snap or to reply to me. Now looking back at it, I do not understand why I did not remove him from my life sooner, as there was a lot of even more impactful stuff wrong with our friendship. When I first started spending weekends with my dad I realized my mom was manipulating not only me, but also her entire side of my family and my stepdad, saying he was an alcoholic abusive deadbeat, where in reality he was an amazing person to be around. Let's say that a good portion of the family started cutting contact with her. I worked at a friend's shop for a while and had to travel out of town on payday. I asked him to deposit my paycheck into the bank for me so I'd have travel money. He said he did it, but when I looked for it, it wasn't there. Days passed and he sent me a photo of himself at the bank with money, saying okay it's done, with no apology about lying prior to that. I started watching everything he did after that and realized he was a pathological liar and had lied to me and everyone else. From the start of our friendship, I never trusted him again. This is a long story, so bear with me on this one. Had a friend who always told me outlandish stories about herself. She seemed like a cool person, and I found her very interesting. She had told me that she was born in Korea, lived there until she was like 7, moved to America, was held back a couple of years because she didn't speak English, and that's why she was 18 in the 7th grade. Went a few years thinking that was true, until I mentioned the story to my BFF, and found out that she had been next door neighbors with my friends her entire life. When I confronted her about it, she claimed she never said that. Every story she ever told me about herself, she claimed never happened. It was really confusing, but I had a bad memory, so I just wrote it off as a misunderstanding on my part. Then she told us she was friends with one of our favorite pop idols. Still not sure how we believed this one. Told us she met 2 of them while in school in Korea. and that they introduced her to the rest of them. Took me a while to realize that was impossible, seeing as she had told us she never lived in Korea. Started noticing more inconsistencies with many of her stories and that everyone who knew her had a different version of who she was. That's when I started to realize that she lied to everyone throughout our entire friendship. I don't know what's worse, the fact that she tricked multiple people into believing all of her lies, or the fact that I'm one of the only people that picked up on it. I don't think I even fully realized it was manipulation yet per se, but I remember looking up the definition of an anxiety attack on a whim, only to find it painfully relatable, and recognized I was having anxiety attacks every time that specific person even interacted with me. I asked some other friends for advice, and then when my manipulator learned I was talking to other people, they got nasty with me about it and called it one-sided. Yeah, I started recognizing the problem around then. When I rewatched Tangled for the first time in years and cried for Rapunzel, Mother Gothel was so manipulative, and I kept having to pause the movie because I kept remembering stuff that my mom did, like Rapunzel doesn't have a door, but Gothel does, so she can lock Rapunzel out, but Rapunzel can never do the same to her. And when Rapunzel asked to see the lanterns up close, Gothel says no and instead offers Rapunzel paints. I've never had a door that locks, and I can recall multiple times when I've wanted something even as small as a pack of cookies when I was younger and my mother bought it and let me have a couple and ate the rest herself, among other things. Emotional manipulation isn't talked about as much as it should be, and that's a big problem. When I checked my bank account and my house deposit was significantly diminished by now ex-husband. Then the large transactions using my account at cafes and restaurants was kind of a sign something was up. Money is just money. His loss. My cousin stole $2, 3 meters from his parents and our grandparents. He was their financial advisor. Grandparents sold their house and moved in with my other uncle, and his parents are gonna have to work into their 60s. They're in their early 50s and were going to retire last year, which is how they found out about it. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to say, but I used to be a manipulator. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I always thought I was right. I realized I was so wrong was when my best friend got a boyfriend, and I was incredibly jealous, and I was desperate for his attention and to just forever be my best friend's #1 guy so much so that I didn't want him to hang out with anyone else. I used to say things like, why did this change things between us, and we've known each other for years and this guy comes out of nowhere thinking he knows us. Awful poop like that. And I honestly thought I was the victim, and I did my best to make my friend feel like I was the victim. One day my friend texted me to cancel plans with me to hang out with his new boo, and I said out loud I'm going to freak out over this and started typing. And my brother just turns to me and says, are you serious? Don't do that. It seriously got me to think about what I was doing. In another instance I was messing with my cat, as one does. And my brother says, why do you do that to her? And I just said I can do this because she just keeps coming back. And my brother, in a joking tone, says, haha, you sound like an abusive boyfriend, and tbh, that was the line that made me rethink my whole attitude. No one has ever said anything about my behavior. I surround myself with really introverted people who just never told me I did anything wrong. I'm a really compassionate person, so I never thought I was doing anything wrong because I spent so much time helping people out, listening to others, volunteering, teaching, all that poop. So how could I possibly be a bad person? Question mark? Question mark? /s. But it's clear now that I was also a very selfish, manipulative person. It was never anyone's responsibility to tell me I was being poopy, and I'm surprised I didn't lose more friends. I've never admitted it, but I'm so glad my brother and my best friend put me in my place, so to speak. It took years, but I have since unlearned my problematic behavior, and I put so much effort every day to be a better man than I used to be. Apologies will never be enough, and I do everything I can to make up to my friend. I'm still best friends with my dude. We really patched things up after a few years. I was actually his best man at his wedding with the same guy that I thought was ruining our friendship. I have since become close friends with my friend's now husband. It took me a while, but I apologized to him as well. IDK, I feel like I'm living proof that the nicest person can have the illest intentions, and we should all be more critical about who we think we are as a person. Thanks for reading. I feel like I just confessed my deepest darkest secret. If you find that you are being manipulated, the best thing you can do is to cut people off or tell them that they are being super shitty, and don't take poop from them. Stay strong. It's your life and no one owns you, and you don't owe anything to anyone. If you are manipulating someone, duck you. You don't own anyone and no one owes you anything. People live their own lives outside of yours. Edit. Here's some more stuff for you guys. I know I said just cut people off, but I understand that can be very traumatic for some of us. Some people can be helped. Understand that some people don't even know they are manipulative, and they're likely hurting too. Some people are worth the effort to correct. It prevents them from manipulating others in the future and overall will better their lives as well as your own. If they are truly someone who cares about you, they will change for the better. It's difficult and painful, but perhaps the best thing you can do for yourself and for others. Not to be that guy, but I'm really glad my friend gave me a second chance, and I honestly think we make each other better people. My friend and I may be in a relationship with other people, but we are each other's soulmates, no homo. But we all need to remember to do what's best for yourself before anything else. If that means letting go of someone, that might be it. Was my housemate and friend of a boy at 4 years. He'd been working on a contract for about 6 months which he was getting paid 16k at completion, so I'd been subbing him to help pay his rent and bills for the previous 4 months. Completion date came and went. I asked him when are they going to pay him so I could get my money back. I just fired lots of questions and he got flustered, and when asked what was the name of the company was, and he said I can't remember. You don't forget the name of the company that owes you 16k. Suddenly all the other odd stuff started to slot into place. We hadn't seen any letters from the estate agents or utility companies for a while. He claimed he'd sorted the bills and would deduct off what he owed me. Someone said that they'd seen him in a town where he wasn't meant to be. He'd always rush to answer the phone. Other people started coming round, then they'd go into a room and have an argument. There was no contract obviously. He'd leave the house in a suit in the morning, wait till everyone else had left, then go back to the house and hang out there until the evening. Wait for the mail and remove all the final demands from the utility companies, etc. The phone calls and arguments were other people he owed money to. Confronted him, but a bit too late. He vanished a couple of days later. Took his clothes and personal effects. Turned out there was another 3k of unpaid bills and rent I had to pay to get his furniture and crap cleared and scrapped. Ended up having to pay it all myself. Good news is, he loaned me his old phone, which still had all his contacts on it. So we started from A until we got to a person who said, yeah, he's here. Did you want to speak to him? Sued him and got about half the money back. Had a childhood friend I was very close to, especially in our final years of high school. We came from different side of the tracks, so to speak. She was well off and I was not. Neither of us had a particularly great home life, so we spent a lot of time out and about. She did a lot of shopping, and while it was challenging, I did my best to keep up, and for the most part she was pretty inclusive in sharing some of her spoils with me. I had liked to think that we supported each other through difficult times and offered a reprieve from the pain and disappointment our families brought us. It wasn't until we were nearing graduation did I start to see the manipulation. Her situation was always worse than mine. Did nothing but feed my insecurities. And almost every conversation was a woe is me fest. At the time, I only saw her as someone who was in the same kit of pain I was in and was just handling it differently. I did my best to listen and support her, but it was never enough, and she never seemed to want to change her status quo. It finally came to a head when I got my first boyfriend. I had been single all throughout school and was really insecure about it. So when I finally met someone who returned my feelings, she really took a turn for the worse. She got physically and emotionally abusive and took every opportunity to sow doubt about my budding romance, going as far to lie about intimate interactions she had with my soon-to-be boyfriend. They shared one CL but and only became aware of her when she insisted on sitting behind him. Close bracket. I finally had it when she was making me feel terrible about myself and punched me in the chest to drive her point home. I slapped her across the face and told her to never touch or speak to me again. She was stunned, and I felt so much relief for having finally stood up for myself. After this point I had a lot of time to reflect on our friendship and realized it had always been like that, but had become more severe when I had started flexing some independence. She had done so many manipulative things to me under the guise of friendship it left me stunned. I felt like I had been some kind of poor rescue animal she had taken pity on and kept around for entertainment and codependent companionship. She had been a pathological liar and would maliciously interfere with the relationships of others to take from them what she felt she was due. I'm ashamed of some of the behavior I defended because I wanted to see the good in her. I don't think I ever really spoke to her again after that. But that realization made me really distrustful, and it took me years to develop close friendships again. Despite all that, I've found the best people to call my friends and even married the boyfriend. We've been together for 14 years and are expecting our second child in the late spring. As for her, I can only hope she's found some peace and no longer uses people like she did when she was younger. She was smart and funny, but narcissism really poisoned her. My ex-GF used to manipulate me with various tactics like gaslighting, the Benjamin Franklin effect, emotional manipulation, and when I told her no she would say, "Oh, you're so manipulative!" Even though I'm nothing but encouraging, and I'll never tell a person what they can and cannot do. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.